Welcome to the Satsop Business Park, site of the unfinished nuclear power plants, Units 3 and 5, which would have been two separate nuclear power plant units. My name is Alyssa Shea, and I'm the General Manager of the Satsop Business Park, which is owned and operated by the Port of Grace Harbor. These nuclear power plant buildings are normally closed to the public due to their unfinished nature and a variety of very serious safety hazards that exist inside. However, today we're here to give you an exclusive inside look inside some of these unfinished buildings that the public normally does not have access to. But first, let's give you a brief overview of the history of the site. Beginning in 1972, the Washington Public Power Supply System, or WPS, started site location and land purchases in Grace Harbor County. Each plant would have had 1,250 megawatts of output to the grid, capable of supplying power needs to approximately 1 million people. By 1980, there were massive construction efforts on both plants with over 5,000 workers on site. In late 1982, Plant 5 construction was terminated at approximately 15% completion. By 1986, construction of Plant 3 was terminated, and the plant was placed in long-term preservation. By 1995, staff was reduced to a minimum to keep plant equipment safe, while a contract to return the site to its natural environment was written. In 1996, local leaders suggested there may be a better use for the facility than simply returning it to a natural area, as approximately $1 billion of investment still existed in the buildings and infrastructure. In 1998, the Washington State Legislature passed a bill that transferred the site to Grace Harbor County, along with $25 million in seed money to transform the site into a business park, and the Grace Harbor Public Development Authority, or PDA, was effectively created. The PDA owned and operated the site up until 2012, when they determined that the Port of Grace Harbor would be an excellent steward of this facility. In 2013, ownership of the site was transferred to the port, who continues to operate the site today as a business park with commercial and industrial space. The Satsop Business Park operates as one of the port's 7 lines of business. With warehouse, office space, land, and access to robust utilities, the business park is a key component of the port's ability to attract jobs and economic development to Grace Harbor County. Now that we've learned a little bit more about the history of the site, let's head over to Cooling Tower 3 and meet with Ross, our Director of Operations, and start our tour. Welcome to the Unit 3 Cooling Tower. We're here with Ross, our Director of Operations, to learn more about this structure. Ross, obviously a cooling tower is one of the most iconic features of a nuclear power plant. Tell us more about the purpose of a cooling tower in a nuclear power plant operation.
Sure, I'll try to do that. So we're standing on the intake structure, and this is where the cold water from the cooling tower would have been pumped over to the steam condensers in the turbine building, condensing that steam back to water so that it can be recycled in the system. The warm water coming back from the condensers is pumped up through the riser columns and gets sprinkled out through a packing layer at the 40-foot level, and the water cools as it falls back into the collection pond. So it's really just a circulating cold water loop.
So it's basically like a giant radiator.
Right.
I know there's a lot of curiosity about what it looks like inside. Is that something we could go take a look at today?
Yeah, let's go take a look at the spray deck level. This is the access stairwell. It's 746 stairs all the way to the top, but we'll be just going to the 40-foot level where the spray deck is.
Wow, this is incredible. Ross, tell us what we're looking at in here.
Okay, let's look from the center here. Okay, so we're standing here on the center riser column. There's 5 riser columns through the center of the tower here. That's where the warm water is pumped up from the turbine condensers, and then it floods out through these flood channels and then gets distributed with these distribution pipes and then falls down by gravity over a 4-foot thick layer of packing material, which creates surface area and distribution for the evaporative cooling effect.
So it seems like the most obvious interesting feature in here is the echo.
Yeah, we can demonstrate that here as we take a look at the riser column. In the flood channel, if you just peek over the edge, you'll be able to see the water riser column and how it comes up and fills the flood channel, where the hot water would then be dispersed out. In the center is the best echo.
Wow. Is that a handrail up there? Do people actually go to the top?
Yeah, actually we do have to do monthly safety inspections and maintain the obstruction lighting, so you want to go up?
Sure.
Well, let's head up to the top. Well, we've made it to the top of the East Cooling Tower, Unit 3. We're 496 feet above grade, which puts us a little over 800 feet above sea level. We're walking along the south rim of the shell, and if you notice the lines on the shell, it kind of gives you an idea of the construction process. This was built in a continuous pour of concrete where they would do one loop and then lift the forms up and then continue pouring. So each of those marks on the shell is a lift from the forms and the construction. The best part about up here is obviously the view. That's what everybody's interested in. And from the south rim here, looking south, we can normally see Mount St. Helens, Mount Adams, Mount Rainier to the east a little. Obviously the forest lands surrounding. A little cloudy today, so we can't see much of that. Out to the west behind me, actually I can see out to Grays Harbor, the North Bay area, and you can actually see the spit of ocean shores right at the horizon. Well, you notice the obstruction lighting placed around the handrail. That's for aviation safety. Anything over 250 feet needs to have lighting. So we're inspecting to make sure that's operating correctly. Also looking at the hardware for the handrail, stairs, as well as the grounding system for lightning suppression, and just general structural integrity of the tower shell.
Well, thanks for showing us the inside of Cooling Tower 3 and taking us to the top. That's definitely something most people don't get a chance to look at. Now join us on our next stop at Reactor Building 3. I'm back with Ross for the next part of our tour, and we're inside the unfinished Reactor Auxiliary Building 3. We're going to take a look inside an area that is usually off limits to the public. According to our records, this building is one of the largest buildings inside Grays Harbor County, and it also extends 55 feet below ground.
We're standing in the Reactor Auxiliary Building, which surrounds the reactor building. There's a total of 5 levels, 2 levels below ground and 3 levels above ground. And we'll go ahead and go into the reactor building here. So we're standing here in the equipment hatch of reactor building number 3. You can see it's a steel containment vessel, 2¼ inches thick steel. It's actually a pressure vessel. And then what you would view from the outside is a reinforced concrete building surrounding the reactor building.
Wow, that sounds like a really thick wall. It almost sounds like a building within a building. Why would it be made that way?
It really is. The reactor vessel itself contains the nuclear reactor and steam generators, and the outer shell is merely a protective shield wall for missile attack or anything to hit from the outside, as well as additional radioactive shield from inside if anything went bad. Let's go up and see where the reactor was. Okay, we're here on the top level of the reactor building, and we can see down in this pool is where the nuclear reactor actually sat. Be centered in the hole underneath those grating plates down there. This pool would have been lined with stainless steel, and then it would have operated under a blanket of water. The nuclear reactor is obviously the heat source for the power plant, basically a giant pressure cooker. It would have heated water to create steam, and that steam would have then transferred over to the turbine building where it spun the turbine, connected to the generator, generating electricity. You can see the penetrations through the building along the wall here that carried the steam piping that goes over to the turbine building to spin the generator, and that's where we're headed next.
We just left the Reactor Auxiliary Building 3 and we're about to go in the turbine building. Although the turbine building was built as part of the unfinished nuclear power plant, it still plays a role in the Satsop Business Park today. It is available as a 300,000 square foot building that could be used as a manufacturing or distribution space. However, its original purpose was very different. Ross, can you take us through how the turbine building would have functioned as part of the nuclear power plant?
Yeah. Obviously, this is where the turbine and generator sat, so let's go take a look at it. So we're in the turbine building. It's over 600 feet long and 200 feet wide, and would have housed both turbine and generators for the Unit 3 and Unit 5 projects. We're standing by the condenser pit for the Unit 3 side. Behind me, you can see the concrete columns that made up the turbine pedestal, and that's a free-floating concrete structure that the turbine and generator sat on, and it's completely isolated from the rest of the building. There's a gap around the entire structure to prevent any vibration from transferring from one to the other. And we'll get a look at that when we go up and take a look at the turbine deck and see where the equipment sat. So we're on the top floor of the turbine deck, and we're standing on the turbine pedestal. As I explained below, the free-floating pedestal where the turbine and generator sat. The steam turbine was behind you within that railing, and behind me is where the generator sat, connected to the turbine. So the steam generated in the reactor building was piped over here and would spin the turbine assembly on this end, connected to the generator on this end. The generator had a net output of 1,243 megawatts. We'll walk over here towards the common bay, which is actually the center of the building, bisects the building in half. It's the access for any materials or equipment to come from the ground up to the turbine deck. And you'll get a sense of scale of the size of the building as you take a look over. And you'll notice overhead, we have two 250-ton bridge cranes that span the full length of the building, capable of lifting 1 million pounds. And clearly they were used for lifting the generator and turbine equipment up to this level.
Now that we've had a chance to take a look at the turbine building for both Units 3 and 5, let's go take a closer look at Unit 5, which, as we learned earlier, is a lot less complete than Unit 3. We just had a chance to look inside Unit 3, which is only about 80% complete, but now we're standing outside of Unit 5, which is only 15% complete. Ross, can we take a look inside of these structures?
Yeah, we'll be able to take a look inside of Cooling Tower 5, but the reactor building 5 is a little too dangerous to enter, so we'll have to take a look at that from the outside.
So Ross, since we can't go inside of this building, why don't you tell me what the most common question is that you get asked about the reactor building 5?
Yeah, I get a lot of questions about what's the hole in the side, or what's the stuff poking up off the top. And that's just the unfinished shield wall and rebar sticking out the top that was never completed. The actual reactor containment vessel was completed in construction, but it was torn out and scrapped in the 80s, so it's been gone a long time. So what you see is the shield wall and the perimeter of the reactor auxiliary building. So the lower levels are constructed, but much of the floors and interior structure is not constructed. So we're standing here at the base of Cooling Tower 5 in what would have been the intake structure.
It looks different on this side than the other side. What's the reason for that?
As we mentioned, Unit 5 only got about 15% complete, so this structure never got completed, although the circ water pipes were constructed over to the tower between here and the turbine building. These were all underground after construction, but they were exposed in 2012 to support fire departments, military, those type of groups that do tunnel training activities, including live fire rescue training. Yeah, let's go check out the echo in the circ water pipe. Hello!
Wow. Is anyone in there?
We've got about 1,500 feet of 12-foot diameter pipe between here and the turbine building.
And the echo is just bouncing all the way back from there. Wow.
Well, let's go check out the inside of the cooling tower.
So Ross, I can't believe how much different this one looks than the other one.
Yeah, clearly this one didn't get nearly as complete in construction. Mainly just the shell of the structure and a portion of the pond underneath. Obviously there's been dirt piled in here, so that's why we're able to stand on it and walk in here. It gives a good example of the riser columns that we talked about at Unit 3. At the top of these columns is where the spray deck level would have been constructed. And this is again where the hot water coming back from the condensers would have been cycled up through the top and then distributed out through that packing material before falling back to the pond.
This looks like a great place to film movies. Has anything ever been done in here?
Yeah, there's been a number of projects, sound recording, music performances, and Transformers 4 and 5 both filmed scenes in here.
Thank you for joining us on this tour of the unfinished Washington nuclear power plants Units 3 and 5. And thank you, Ross, for providing all the interesting insight and history on these unique structures. Unfortunately, we're not able to offer public tours or public access due to the unfinished and dangerous nature of these structures. But on your next visit through Grace Harbor County, feel free to take a detour and come up here to take a look at the structures. There are public roads throughout the site, and you can drive through and get up close to the cooling towers without crossing the fences.